Hello everyone, this is Indira Rakhimova, your instructor. We'll have a lesson 14 with you today. So today's topic is American prose since 1945. This is after World War II, yes? And in today's lesson, we will have some types of the agenda, like firstly, we will get introduction part, then it will move to background information, then 1950, 1960s years in the prose, and then after 1970s where we will look at the 1980s and the contemporary prose type here and the authors and the conclusion part. Yes, let's get started with the introduction part. So, American prose since 1945, realism and experimentation is the focus of our today's lesson. The agenda, introduction, we spoke about it earlier, the introduction, the realist legacy and the late 1940s, the affluent but alienated 1950s, the turbulent but creative 1960s, the 1970s and 1980s, new directions, new regionalism and authors that are referred to this field. About the background information. Narrative since World War II resists generalization. It has been vitalized by international currents such as European existentialism and Latin American magical realism, while the electronic era has brought the global village. Writers started to move to this prose type because they had accumulated a lot of information from World War II, and they were eager to write and to share them on the paper. And the realist legacy and the late 1940s, this is actually the end of the 40s where we can know the end of the World War II, as in the first half of the 20th century, fiction in the second half reflects the character of each decade. Each decade has their own characters and the heroes, heroines, because it varied, it differed, because the circumstances made them to change the characters from prose to prose. The late 1940s saw the aftermath of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War. After World War II, the era started with the Cold War because people strived, yes, people were hungry, and therefore this period was called as the Cold War. And we can see here the list of the works that were written at that time, like Norman Mailer, James Jones, Herman Hook, and also showed that human foibles were as evident in wartime as in a civilian time. Let's move to 1950s, and firstly the Norman Mailer and James Jones, they were the representatives of that period, like a Cold War period, and they worked at that time in this field. The affluent but alienated 1950s. The 1950s saw the delayed impact of modernization and technology in everyday life before the Great Depression. The faceless corporate man became a cultural stereotype in Sloan Wilson's best-selling novel The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit that was written in 1955. Some studies spoken in general terms, criticizing citizens for losing frontier individualism and becoming too conformist. They confirmed they opposited everything. Novels by John O'Hara, John Cheever, and John Updike explore the stress lurking in the shadows of semi-satisfaction. They were in the press and they wrote everything in this mood. And in this kind of mood, in this kind of manners, and they were written some masterpieces like the Arthur Miller's Death, Says the Day, The Catcher in the Rye, Invisible Man, and On the Road. Let's move to 1960s. The alienation and stress underlying the 1950s found outward expression in the 1960s in the United States in the civil rights movement, feminism, anti-war protests, minority activism, and the arrival of a counterculture whose effects are still being worked through American society. At that time, such kind of works, including Breakfast at Tiffany's, In Cold Blood, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, Radical Kick, and Mowing the Flag Catchers, were released at the time. As the 1960s evolved, the literature flowed with the turbulence of the era. An ironic comic vision also came into view, reflected in the fabulism of several writers, including One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Thomas Pynchon's Paranoid Brilliant V, The Crying of Lot 49, Gil Scott Boy. And in 1960s and 1970s and 1980s, new directions started to appear. By the mid-1970s, an era of consolidation began. The Vietnam conflict was over, followed soon afterward by U.S. recognition of the People's Republic of China in America's bicentennial celebration. Drama shifted from realism to more cinematic. Dramaturgy started to appear at the time, kinetic techniques. At the same time, however, the mid-decade was reflected in such fresh new talents as Jay McInerney and Bret Easton Ellis and Tama Janowitz. They wrote a lot of works that belonged to that movement. In the here we can see the world according to Garp, the Mosquito Coast, the color purple. And the new regionalism. There is nothing new about the regional tradition in American literature. It is as old as the Native American legends, as evocative as the works of James Fenimore Cooper and Bret Harte, as resonant as the novels of William Faulkner and the plays of the Tennessee Williams. Nonetheless, for the past decade or so, regionalism has been making a triumphant return in American literature, enabling readers to get a sense of place as well as a sense of time and humanity. American literature has traversed an extended, winding path from pre-colonial days to contemporary times. Society, history, technology all have had telling impact on it. Everything started to impact on the literature, and literature has also evolutionized with the impact of technology, society, political reforms. Yes, everything started to get changes. And the authors that refer to this moment: James Fenimore Cooper, Bret Harte, Thomas Pynchon. He is a mysterious publicity-shunning author. He was born in New York and graduated from Cornell University in 1958, where he may have come under the influence of Vladimir Nabokov. Certainly, his innovative fantasies use themes of translating clues, games, and codes that could derive from Nabokov. Pynchon's flexible tone can modulate paranoia into poetry. The masterful use of popular culture, particularly science fiction and detective fiction, is evident in his works. Gravity's Rainbow. His convoluted, elusive novel about a metaphysical quest, published in 1973, further confirmed Pynchon's reputation as one of the great writers of the century. Here you can see the references to do research on the topic, and you may learn about the topic in a detailed way by looking through these websites that are related to the topic. So guys, thanks for your attention, and I hope that you are enjoying the lessons, and please do the tasks that are attached to the Moodle. One more time, thanks a lot and goodbye.